and welcome to another episode of the From Her View podcast. With me, Sade Camille, and I'm extremely excited for this episode. And honestly, the inspiration kept coming to me in various forms. But at first I was like, oh, I really don't want to do this. It's something that I've said before that I wanted to do, but then there was times where I was like, oh, I don't want to do this, blah, blah, blah. Like I don't think I'm the person for the topic. But just coming off of a few like stints of dates, I really got some good information, and I just was like, you know what? This is From Her View podcast. Like, this would be the space and the place to really share that information in a she splaying type of way. But not necessarily in a she splaying type of way, just like literally at the basic form of delivering information. And it is the topic of dating now. So this is something that I go back and forth with Holy Spirit about, because I just feel like um it's just very like difficult for me personally. Everybody it's difficult for, but I think the reasons of difficulty is different for everybody for various reasons. And so for myself, I was just like, there's things that I say that I want, that I things that I know that I need, and when I get them, I'm immediately like, yeah, I don't want this. And it's really up to us as women to be completely honest with ourselves as far as what we do want. And when you go on these dates, if you are dating someone of like sufficient caliber, meaning for myself, like I can't say it, but it's basically a person that is more attractive to the mentality, the mindset of a person, intelligence. If we cannot have a good conversation about any and everything, you've lost me. Because that shows me that you only have face value what you have to offer me, that you can't offer me anything more than that. You can't give me what I need to progress in life, as far as like teaching me things, making sure that I level up as you level up, and that iron sharpens iron type scenario. Now, I will preface this to say I don't care, what your opinion is. This is my opinion, and I will say I probably was like a majority of you that was like, oh no, gender roles are BS, BS. But it's like, actually, there are certain things that we as women were made to do. It's very unpopular opinion for a lot of women, but there's things that we are just made to do. Like, God made us to be the helpmate. He made Adam first. He took from Adam and formed us. So Adam is without something, and he's without a piece of himself, and we are a piece of himself. We are his rib, essentially. And when you break it down like that, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen too many like ribs walking around here existing, fully to their full potential, without a brain, without a heart, without a cardiovascular system, without a skeletal system. I mean, well, the rib is kind of a part of the skeletal system, but without the full makings of a body. So that's when the two shall become one scenario comes into play. And so it's really difficult for me right now trying to like navigate what I know in scripture and acting that out and looking to the Bible for that clarification on what does that look like. Because for myself, I think I can be so left, so right, no in between. There's like no balance in what that looks like. And at the end of the day, that would be it's very difficult. It's very difficult to navigate either way. So, I've been on dates, even though if you listen to my last podcast, I was like, I am done with dating. But it just so happened that there was a person of very good interest that I was talking to, like great head on his shoulders, like a gentleman, very kind, uh, just very, very comforting, very attentive, just like a very great guy. And we just had really good conversations. And so our conversations were clarifying questions, getting to know each other. But because I was listening to what he said, I wasn't listening to respond, I was listening to understand. I was understanding what it means to be a man like himself, or a man like himself, like a man that's actually like dating with the intentions of like finding a person and wanting to settle down and not wanting to, you know, be single forever. A lot of the guys that I do uh end up going on dates with happen to never been married, typically have like one child, um maybe two here and there, I would say, but like a majority of them are in my age range, maybe 5, 6 years older, and they've never had that. And so it's different for me coming as like a woman that's divorced, has been married, knows what it's like to be married, and knows and just learn from the mistakes from her viewpoint, meaning not pointing the finger at my ex and saying, "He did this and he did that and da da da." But knowing what I know now is that I wasn't fully operating in what my position of power was. I wasn't doing those things. And so, this guy in particular, we're having the conversation, and he was like, "Man, this sounds like a podcast. Like this sounds really good." And I've never told him that I have a podcast, because I didn't want him to think that like, oh, I'm like going on dates as like a case study, but that's not the case. It was just that the conversation was so good. The way that I do ask questions, I guess, is a very, formal podcast type way. And it just kind of is what it is at that point. But what we were talking about essentially, which I think is a good point, was people being 100% honest with themselves as far as like what they actually need. And so he was saying, I've come across people that say that they want this thing, but their actions definitely dictate that they want something completely different. And if people would be a little bit more honest with themselves, they could get that. If you are honest with a person, you can then gauge from them if that's something that interests them or if it's something that's not. So his thing was like, for instance, because this is like one of those topics where I'm like, oh my God, it's like so prevalent in the dating scene where I'm from. I mean, y'all can chime in from where you're from, but it's very prevalent in the dating scene now for people to say like, oh, I'm poly. And for myself, and even for him, like we discussed it, I was like, for myself, like I couldn't do it. Like I'm not a sharer, so I can't do that. But what he was saying, he was like, I don't even think he said one way or the other, but what he did say was that, and which I already knew this, is that's meant for like the wealthy, for people of status. He said it's not meant for the average guy. He's like, because with true polyamory, you are supposed to take care of each separate household. And true polyamory, it does not mean that your partners coincide with one another or you have that how to say that, cross-pollinating or anything like that. It is, you have very specific relationships with this person, you have a very specific relationship with that person, you have children with this person and that person, very specific relationships. The kids probably, cohabitate and everything like that. They know of each other, they know who each other are, you probably do Christmases and everything like that. So basically it's like the Nick Cannon situation, but in a more up and up way. But basically that's what it is. And so he was like, people aren't honest with themselves when they say that. And honestly, I've had someone not approach me in that way, but in random instances, like out of the blue. It wasn't out of the blue, because they was really seeking a specific answer out of me, and I could never give it, because it's just not who I am. And I don't believe in breaking off pieces of yourself to fit in a puzzle that you weren't ever meant to be in, or painting yourself a different color to fit into a color scheme that you weren't meant to be in. And so that's just something that I just, like, I cannot do. And, like, I can't do it. Like, even if I tried to do it, I would just be like, no, I can't. I just, no matter how hard I try, I would not be able to do that. So that was it was a good conversation with that, because it's true. A lot of people do say that they're ready for dating, they're ready for relationship, and they don't have the time. So this guy in particular, he was like, I'm ready now, but I wasn't ready before. I was really, working long hours, and I just didn't have the time to dedicate to another person, to make those things happen for another person, whatever the case may be. And for myself, like, I know I'm going to be walking into a season in that intentionally, where I might not have that time, but I do want to carve out a little bit of time for that. But I completely understand that. So it's one of those things where you cannot say that, like, "Oh Lord, where's my husband? Where is he at?" Like, and you don't go out and you don't put yourself out there, like, you don't try um to date. And a lot of people, I think, are scared of, like, the rejection, which we went over in two podcasts of, how to handle rejection and the rejection mystery and all of that. It's just something that comes with it. And myself, like, understanding that now, like, I take it a bit better. One of the things I'm not going to take is if you take something I said or texted out of context from what my intentional meaning is. So I always want to clarify myself, because if I'm going to say something rude or disrespectful or distasteful, it's going to be with intent. I don't ever want my words to be like, "Oh, it came across that," because I'm like, I'm not passive aggressive in nature. Like, if I said it, I said it. I'll say it to you. I'll say it to whomever I said it to around. They could ask me in front of you if I said it, and I will say that I said it. Um, at the end of the day, accountability and owning up to your words. If you have any fear of man to say what you said, don't say it at all. And so there are moments where, like, I don't have fear of man, but I'm just like, is this even productive for the conversation? You know what I'm saying? Like, is this even conducive? And it's so funny, because I've had a coworker say, he was like, there's plenty of times where, like, you do not talk much. Like, honestly, you do not talk much. But when you do talk, baby, there's always something. Like, you are always, like, right there with it. And it's very true. And that's something that I've known my entire life. And um, words do create worlds. So I do try to keep myself, like, tight lip and not, like, say a whole lot, and, not, like, do a whole lot, because, I'm just not really trying to do the most. I'm not trying to do the most with that. And so that was a good conversation. But then I had another conversation with another person, and it was really, it's something that I know, and I actually touched on it in a previous episode. where I was talking about what it means to me to for being a woman, and just kind of like the things that we need to look at as far as our health is concerned, and taking that seriously, and really advocating for the treatment that we need, really advocating for second opinions, and getting our questions answered, and looking to wherever you have to look, because it is unfortunate, especially in the African American community, that our our voices for women, especially, are not heard when it comes to matters of health, specifically in the realms of our feminine health. But in this juncture, we're having a conversation, and it was one of those things where it's like I understood. I've always had this understanding from observation. I never had the understanding from admission from a man. This is just always like something that I've observed, whether it be from like the news, from stories, from life, just from everything. This is something that I've observed. You could see it in history. You could see it in all aspects of the world if you actually look and pay attention. Because for myself, there's certain social constructs and patterns that have been here as long as the earth has been here, and we think that these things are new, but there's nothing new underneath the sun. It's new to you haven't been here as long as these things have been here. You're new to these things, and so these things are introducing themselves to you because you're new. Okay, you think these things are new? No, baby, you're new. Okay, so with that being said, he basically was like, guys have, will have the money, the cars, the bling, because we're talking about like in the African American community specifically, because that's our experience. So that's the area of which we can share from. And he was saying, we have like this flashy, boisterous way about ourselves. And for me, in my mind, he describes peacocking. It's what peacocks do. Like, they flash, they do their little dance. Several animals, several species, they do that. They have like a mating dance or a mating call or things that they do and whatnot, what have you. And just basically saying that you know guys will have the cars, the stacks of cash, the shoes, the bling, and stuff like that. And he was like, they do that to get women because it's been proven that if you have those things, like they get women, is this things that that they seed. And I have had a guy say that. Like I have had a guy say that, oh, I got a motorcycle because I saw in the neighborhood that other guys had motorcycles and they always were driving around with the girls on the back of their motorcycles. And so I got one and I got me a girl. And for myself personally, that just doesn't move me. I'm like, who are you as a person? Like, what is your mindset like? Like, are you going to motivate me? Are you going to be able to pour into me? Like, how are you when we have a difficult conversation? Are you immediately going to shut me out, or are you going to take time to like explain yourself, clarify yourself? Like, those are things that I look for, because at the end of the day, if you are a formidable helpmate, because it takes you like I don't like what's going on now where it's like pitting male against female and whose fault is it and blah 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 and blah blah blah. Like, that is something that I don't like. But what I will say is you have to be a formidable helpmate. And so we also were talking about like how the women are like, oh, I have a car, I have a degrees and this and this and this and this. And he was like, to a man, like, that means nothing to a man, because that's not going to make a man choose you. And it's a conversation that me and one of my friends have had. And I was like swearing up and down. I was like, no, like the guy that's for me, like he's gonna care that I know this and I know that and da da da. And she was like, he's not going to care. And both answers are correct. And here's how. both answers are correct. Both answers are correct because he's not necessarily like having the degrees, this, that, the third. No, it's not going to make him choose you. But it's not going to make him choose you if you don't possess the other qualities that he actually needs. Like all of those things are pluses. But if you don't have the other things that really matter, then they're minuses, if that makes sense. So in this discussion, he was telling me, there are certain things that men want, and I am like kicking myself because I can probably only remember like maybe 3 or 4 of the things. I believe he said it was like 5 things. So hopefully Holy Spirit will like bring it to my memory of what he said. But he said, there's certain things that like men actually like need. And he was like, we're very simple. And that is something that I've heard time and time again, that men are like super simple, like very simple. Like it doesn't take a whole lot. They're very simple. And honestly, I'd be over here like, no, no, like da da da. And it was just literally this conversation that I had with him, that he was just giving me like the cheat code. And it's so funny because I find myself having conversations on dates, and the guys are like, I don't want to give you the cheat code. And then I'll even say that sometimes, like, oh, like I don't want to give you the cheat code, or whatever. But honestly, we need to give out the cheat code. You're like, y'all need this cheat code, okay? Because this is just going to be very easy, very simple, and direct. And it was nice and refreshing because I was like, oh my god, I do possess these qualities, But he said that it was like very, very simple. And so that is some of the things that I wanted to go over today, because I was like, hey, I found out. I want to help you find out. I want to help us, because at the end of the day, no matter what it looks like right now, like I'm believing God for my husband. And at the end of the day, I don't like, I'm reading Ruth currently. And it was so funny because I just decided that like I'm not going to do any of these Bible plans or anything like that. I'm just going to, read the Bible. And I started with, what did I start with? I started with Job because I wanted to learn, more about Job's story and about Leviathan and everything like that. Then I switched from Job to Proverbs. And Proverbs, baby, like I should just do a whole like chapter by chapter of Proverbs, because that alone, if you like translate it into 2024 vernacular, baby, it's so good. But now I'm reading Ruth. And you might be like, hey girl, them books is every them books ain't nowhere near each other. And this is true. And it was just one of those things where I just like asked Holy Spirit, like, what next? And so I'm reading Ruth because Ruth's situation isn't identical to mine, but Ruth was married. She ain't no longer married. She's single. Okay. And so I'm like reading on how she got her Boaz. And so that's very important. And once I get through that, get what Holy Spirit needs me to get out of this, practice these things, I'm definitely going to share it with the podcast, because I'm on this journey just like you're on this journey. I'm not perfect by any means. I'm progressing. And that was my whole intent for the podcast, is I'm going through these life experiences, and sometimes we take life experiences and we think that they're very nuanced, and well, they are nuanced in nature, but we take them, that's not the word I want to use. We take them as if they are a grain of salt or happenstance or coincidence, or it's just another Tuesday. But there's lessons in a lot of the things that we experience in the day to day. And so he literally, just like flat out was like giving me the tea. So I'm going to give you the tea. Okay. So we're having the conversation. And he was like, there's certain things that men just need, and we're very simple. Men need these things. And from a woman. And he said, we need a woman to be feminine. We need a woman to be fit. We need a woman to be courteous. We need a woman to be a listener, and we need a woman to be nurturing. And oh my God, I remembered all five. Look at God. And so that was like really good. So feminine, fit. What did he say? Feminine, fit, courteous, a listener, and nurturing. And so he went into like, he was like, like women think that's, we need to go to a nice, steakhouse and stuff like that. And he's like, a man sometimes is just happy with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So he was basically saying, like, in the grand scheme of things, it's the little things for a man. And I am not going to necessarily dissect each and every single one of these things, because I think that they deserve a full podcast on like the dissecting of them. So I told you what they were, and I think that no, I could dive a little bit deep in there. So with the feminine, there's a lot of things that go with that. So basically, they just don't want someone that is hard or overly masculine and combative and like a yeller and angry and everything like that. Um, I can be upset and still get my point across, actually in the same tone that I'm talking to you. And it's so funny because one of my coworkers was like, "Yeah, you're like very monotone, but I can't believe I got you to do a different inflection in your voice. Like you're very monotone," because he was like really triggering me that day. But this is typically how I talk. My sister said this is my fake voice, but this is typically how I think I sound when I talk. But so that, and being fit. So he said, which I think feminine and fit, they do have some things that like cross change that, like what he's saying. So like fit, like like to take care of yourself, to look good, to smell good, to be attractive in that sense of like be something for your man to look at. Like don't be unkept a lot of the times. Um he's like, honestly, like when a man like really wants to be with you, like he just really wants to be with you, and what really draws that closer is like you looking your best, because there's like a twofold thing. Like you are a reflection of your partner, so they always want you to like look your best because you're their prize in that sense. And so that made a whole lot of sense. So I said fit, feminine, courteous. I think that's what he said. He said courteous. Just we're gonna have to go to Google Isha for courteous, because I don't want to like I don't want to it's like I know what courteous means, but it's one of those things where it's like I don't want to say it in a weird way. Okay, so dictionary. Okay, Oxford. Is polite, respectful, considerate in manner. So that's what the courteous means. Like he just wants you to live your soft life, to be sweet and soft and just, respecting of him. And we think that giving something means that we're not going to receive it, but sometimes you do have to give in order to receive. So he said courteous, and so fit, feminine, courteous, and a listener. So we did talk about that, and he dived deep into it, because I feel like this is one that everybody falls short in. I can't even say just we as women, because no, I think both genders can fall short in this area. And so it is something that needs to be addressed. And so, with that being said, he was just like, um, he was like, it's very hard being a man. Um, we go out into the world and we deal with the stresses and everything, the work that we have to do, everything like that to provide in order to get a woman. Like we need to, you know, have a car, have a good job, a good credit score, have the money in the bank and everything like that, and then that will attract a woman, is what he said. Okay. And he was like, that's very, it's very hard. And he was like, at the end of the day, like, you just want someone to listen to you, to like listen, um, when you're trying to vent and there's things that gone on in your day, and you just want like that support. So for me, what I'm getting from it, is that listening is really an emotional support for them. Like, they go through so much in the day-to-day life, like being a man, when they come home and they're speaking, they want to be heard, understood, and respected in that aspect. And so that's, what was said. And then for myself, I was like, oh, like nurturing is one of them. That's why I could remember nurturing. And he was like, yeah, nurturing. So we're gonna give you the uh, Webster's dictionary, or it's Oxford dictionary of that. And that is to care for and encourage the growth or development of. That is something that women are biologically predisposed to do. We are natural nurturers, meaning a man gave us a seed. We nurture that thing. We encourage the growth and the development of that, and then it becomes a baby, right? And so that's something that they want. They want that encouragement from their partner, because at the end of the day, and we did talk about this too, and because a lot of the guys that I've just so happened to go on dates with have had a great chunk of time between their last relationship, like years between today, their last relationship. And one of the things I knew, like, immediately that popped into my brain was like, okay, you haven't been in a relationship for this long, but you have not been without. Being without means being without, feminine interactions. Okay. And so we're having this conversation. He was like, no. He was like, no, I have not been, without, And I was like, I'm not like, judging you either way, but I'm just like getting like clarification, because that's something that I believe anytime someone says that to me. And he's like, yeah, like, that's true. Like, I haven't been without. And I was like, well, there's one time that, I saw on a podcast that a girl was like, sex for a man is almost like peeing. You know, it is something that just they have to do, that needs to get done. And so then we dove into like a more into like this, like everything that I've said previous was like very clarifying, affirming in some of the things that I thought that I knew, that he just affirmed that I was on the right track, right? But it opened up this whole other like spectrum of like the psychology of a man when it comes to these things. And I have never in life got this tea. Like, never in life have I ever um thought about this either. But as he was saying it, I was like, oh my God, like this makes so much sense. And so what he was saying was like, because I flat out asked him, because this is something that we as women have to know. So like we think that we are, as women, are like the only intuitive people, and we are not the only intuitive people as far as like gender is concerned. Men are intuitive too. What does that mean? He knows who he's talking to before he talks to them. What does that mean? He knows whether you are someone he could see a life with or he could just see himself on top of. As plainly as I can see it. Right. Like that that is very true. And so we were having that conversation and he was like, it's very different than somebody that you're just like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna get this from and da da da. And he was like, and then there's people that you know and like from conversation off the bat. Like he was like, the conversation tells you a whole lot about a person. So that is where what your life experience, yes, you might have done all these other accolades, but how does that translate into the way that you speak? And so that is something that he was like, yeah, like we can tell. We know for a fact. And that was something that I think is something that women need to know and is very like sobering to hear is that you are out here doing the most for someone. Um doing the most in the sense of you are going above and beyond for an individual, and you think by going above and beyond for this individual that it's going to reap a certain outcome, but essentially they already have categorized you into a place that this is how they see you. And that's kind of like it. So it was funny because we also had the conversation of like, so like what is your type, like that. And it's so funny because you would think that I would know, but I'm such a mindset person. Like obviously I don't want to have questionable attraction to anybody, and everybody kind of like laugh when I say questionable attraction. It's like I don't want to have to like squint and be like, but like women do possess the ability to look past appearance and get to know a person and be like, okay, like, yeah, like, I like this person. And I told him flat out, I was like, men don't possess that quality. Men feast with eyes. So that's where the fit comes into play, and his idea of fit is something that is it's different for every man. So let me say that for one. I feel like when he prefaced it as fit, I feel like it's an all encompassing of personal appearance. Because there are some men that like voluptuous women, um, and that's their preference. But with that voluptuousness, okay, they also want you to look clean, put together, nails done, hair done, like done. And that's understandable. But it was one of those things where I really was like, okay, this he is like bringing a lot to my attention, but in that regard he was like, like we know when someone is just a person to actually pause and handle with care versus a person who doesn't. So basically he's saying we know when a person values themselves, we know when a person does not value themselves. And if you don't value yourself, I can't value you. But if you do value yourself, I see the value in you and I'm going to value you as well. And that's something that's on our ball, right? There's certain people out here in culture that present themselves in a certain way, and a lot of women are emulating them and you know trying to live their lives like them, but you have to be very very careful of that, because what they're showing you is like a character, but their real life they're not like that, but you're believing this character. And so he's like, "Yeah, we know." So that's something that you can find like rested. And we were having like even more like juicier parts of that conversation that really brought things to light for myself. Just like he was like, there's just a man will behave a very different way when it's someone that he actually cares about versus a person that he doesn't. And this is something that I've I've over the course of my life have just felt like, well, because I'm a woman, right? And I'm like, well, if he actually cared about you, they would done this, and this. And he was just like breaking it down in a way, like not excusing things, but he was making it make sense in that the things that they do, and you know, whatever the case may be. So it did bring some light to even past dating experiences where I was just like, yeah, baby, I'm gone. Bye. Like, you playing in my face. And it really, you know, really, it was something there. Like, that person did actually like care, and that's how they showed it. So he was explaining to me like the way that they show their care. And I just found it very interesting. Had to bring it to the podcast per usual. And of course, there's a lot more to go over with that. Um, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I want to continue the journey of dating or if I just want to have my head down and like get this paper and do what I gotta do. Because there's just certain goals that I have. But with that being said, that's where I kind of like find the difficulty when it comes to the area of dating, because I feel like the hustle is low key like a masculine thing, because we're not, we're not supposed to be hustling. And we did have this conversation too. That's definitely for another episode. But just me just going over that and thinking. So obviously, I'm going to continue to read Ruth. Um, and get some clarification on that. And I'll be back to you with another episode of the From Her View podcast. So, as always, we have successfully been through 1,000% of the things that were sent to break us. And I hope that this episode was, helpful, beneficial, that you at least got one thing from it, child, because I feel like I didn't quite articulate it in the form or fashion that I wanted to. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I'm kind of pressed for time. But it was on me, and so I really wanted to get it recorded, and let me know what you guys think.